Hello everyone, and welcome to Blue Tengu's Lime Game Development Show, where we show everything that goes into making a game from concept to completion. If you've ever wanted to make a game, we hope this will help lower the barrier to entry, maybe give you the nudge you needed to try it yourself. Even if you're not interested in making a game, we hope you find some entertainment value in what we're doing here. All the information about where you can find us is in the Twitch info down below, or in our YouTube profile for those of you watching us later, but just in case, we're at www.bluetengu.com, btengu on Twitter, facebook.com Blue Tengu Studio, youtube.com Blue Tengu Studio for those of you catching the live stream now, and Twitch TV Blue Tengu for those of you watching us on YouTube. If you missed any episodes, you can always catch them over at YouTube, but you shouldn't have any trouble following along even if you haven't seen them. For those of you who haven't seen the show on Twitch or YouTube before, my name's Eric. I'm a game designer living over here in Japan who's trying to show you everything that goes into making a game for 2 hours a week. Well, a little over 2 hours a week usually, including all the ums and ahs and awkward debugging moments. The reason I'm showing it all as opposed to making the game first and scripting out rehearsed tutorials is because I do want to lower that barrier. You guys feel to making a game, and I hope inspire you to go out and try it and do it yourself, because if you see me floundering around and I can eventually get something done, then you shouldn't feel too bad if you do have to flounder around a little bit. That's part of the fun of game development. Thank you to everyone who dropped by last week, and all of those who watched the video on YouTube. I've already got Cirrus and PandaBits in here with me, so thank you guys for dropping by so early, and the rest of you guys out there too. Feel free to jump in the chat whenever you want to. For those of you here with me on Twitch, feel free to drop suggestions, ask me questions anytime. May not be able to get to them right away because I am working, especially if I'm doing something with script or trying to figure out a problem, but I'll try to get to them, and if I can't, please send me a private message here, or leave a comment on our site or YouTube video, and I'll do my best to address it next time. If any of you are out there making something on your own, you don't mind showing it off, definitely send me a link to your stuff. I'd love to see it. You can even post it in the Twitch feed if you're here with me live. At this time every week for 2 hours, I come on to Twitch TV to work on the game Project Spaghetti, which is a top-down 2D cowboy shooter where the bullets fired bounce around the screen with a pinball mechanic. Last week I implemented the beginnings of a result screen and then transition between levels. I used the pause menu function to kind of stop the action in the game, bring up a screen that shows like different points and things like that, and then faded the screen before the next level started. Over the last week I did get the numbers working, and they even count up, so that's cool. And this week it's time to work on the opening animation. Last week I did say I would, work on the opening animation and then maybe the game over screen, but I'm thinking if I can squeeze some tutorial bits into that opening animation, it's probably worth doing that. Taking some of that tutorial task that I have down there and bringing those and combining those, and then worrying about the game over results screen later. Because at least with the game over results screen, we do have at least the in-between level results screen, so in terms of task risk, it shouldn't be too bad. But the opening animation will take a little bit of time to do, especially if I do want to throw tutorial bits in there. So let's just jump right into it. I guess I should start with the task list, so let's do that. Jump over to my desktop, get Open Broadcaster out of the way, and jump over to Project Spaghetti. Let's see, got to make sure that this browser does stay in my monitor space, because the monitor is pretty old, so it's not 16 by 9, even though I'm broadcasting 16 by 9, so things tend to fall off the bottom of the screen. During that overtime, there were a few problems with the transition between levels that were left over. Like, for example, the player would unfreeze before the next stage started, so I had to fix that. Also tried to add some dust particles when they walk. Still not sure if it's the right way to go or not. It might be a little distracting, but you guys can let me know when you actually see the game in progress. I'll point them out to you. And then the result screen, the point values do count up faster and faster now, and even add a little bit of a little tick, 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 tick sound for when they go up. So that's all I did during the overtime. And this week, I'm going to have to break some of these tasks down to make it more clear what I'm doing. But before, at the end of last week, I had the ready draw sequence at the level start, planning on having that old kind of synthesizer thing So let's see. Well, like I think it was a decent script. Somebody mentioned Sinistar, for example. Run, coward. That old school synthesizer voice, and I think I've got a way to do that with my own voice, as embarrassing as that is. So I may put like a ready draw sequence in there to kind of get the level started, especially if I do that tutorial stuff. So that's part of what's in there. So what I'm going to do for now is take this game over win out of here and break some of these tutorial tasks down and put them in here. Also, I need to break this task down because ready draw includes a lot of things. For example, let's do this in Paintbrush. You've got the ready, and then draw appears on the screen, and then you've got the voice going on. You've got to stop the player. You've got to do a lot of things inside of here. So let's break it down. First thing, I guess, would be when the level starts to have the player walk out. That's part of the opening animation. So let's see. 1 point. Hopefully that doesn't take too long. We'll find out, because I'm going to start using a new feature in GameMaker called timelines. Well, new to me anyway. Everyone else knows what they are, but timelines are kind of a way of getting around like the alarm limit, and they're much easier to use than alarms, because with GameMaker, there's no waits in the script. Like in most scripts, like Lua, things like that, you have wait commands, and you could say wait for 30 frames, wait for 60 frames, wait for 2 seconds. GameMaker doesn't have anything like that anymore with Studio. Before they did, but I think they got rid of it. And now you have to set up alarms, so you call an alarm if you want to have, say, the cowboy walk a certain place, and then 2 seconds later do something else. You have to call an alarm at 2 seconds, and then inside of there stuff happens. But you have a limited number of alarms you can attach to the object, and so if you wanted to do an opening animation using alarms, you'd probably run out. But GameMaker does have something called timelines, which is exactly like the name sounds. You say, at 0 frames I want this to happen, at 30 frames I want this to happen, at 60 frames I want this to happen, and all you have to do is call that timeline. You could even loop them. For example, you could, in games, if you have enemies that have a certain pattern, movement pattern, you can loop the timelines and actually have your kind of enemy AI inside of those timelines. So they're actually pretty versatile. Not sure why I've avoided them until now, but I think I've got everything I've needed to do so far without them, so that'll be interesting. Get the player. So the task will be get the player to walk. Well, let's see, opening. Get the player to walk to the middle and stop. I guess that would be one thing. This should be fairly easy, but display, I guess I should keep all these in the opening tasks. And let me just keep up. Let's see. PandaBits said the stream wasn't loading, so it needed to refresh. I'm sorry about that. Sometimes, it can skip out. Like, for example, on my laptop here, the stream is doing this loading video thing, so I'm not even able to see myself. Hopefully things are going okay. And Torbit's Law says you could just program your own timer. And that's what I always do, since I hate the alarm system. The alarms always get me confused. Yes. Actually, when I very first started out, I think, the first couple of episodes, when I was trying to get the player to wait a certain number of frames before shooting and stuff, I was doing that. I was basically, creating kind of a tick down variable, and then that would just get decremented every step, and then actions would happen. So yeah, you can definitely get around the alarm system, as Torpidsloth mentions, and alarms are kind of confusing, because if you'll see my code when it comes up, or my GameMaker UI thing when it comes up, but you easily forget, oh, wait a minute, what does this alarm do? I mean, obviously you comment them and stuff like that, but it's like it's kind of distracting to have to, go down through your code, see alarm 1 triggers at this, and then you have to jump up to alarm 1 and then see what's in alarm 1, and then that triggers alarm 3, and you have to come down here. It's, old school code-wise, it would be like spaghetti code. It'd be like in BASIC or something using a bunch of go-tos. So alarms are a quick way to kind of get logic all over the place. They are handy, but yeah, I'm with Torpid Sloth. I kind of wish there was just weights and stuff like that. I can understand why GameMaker wanted to avoid them, because it's probably an easy way to end up having your code hang up or whatever, because you're in an infinite loop, and things probably don't happen as you expect, especially if you're not used to things like that. And if GameMaker is designed for people who are it's designed for a wide range of people, but if you're not quite used to coding, then yeah, it could get tricky if you use weights. So I can kind of understand why they took them out, but I wish they were there. I'm with Torpid Sloth. And PandaBits mentions, with the move to center, it should be easy since you already have the pathing for the PC from the mouse movement. Yes, exactly. Could easily just drop, just the mouse drop object, which causes the player to move towards it. It's one way to do it. I think, I should be able to do one other thing that I haven't done in GameMaker yet, which is actually create paths, official paths instead of just AI paths. So using a combination of those two things, I should be able to get it done. Let's see. So walk to the middle and stop. Also display ready, set, draw. Ready pops up on the screen, set, draw, and then that's when the game starts. And this will be really quick, but opening, play, ready, set, draw. Sound effects. You'll get to hear my horrible synthesized voice. I was playing with that last night. So that's game design. Display. Even though it's a graphic thing, it is game design because it's a matter of putting code in. Sound effects as well, since I do have the sound effects, that'll be game design. So those are all game design tasks, easy enough. Those are the easy ones. And then we have to start going into this tutorial stuff. Now what I'm thinking is, to make the tutorial easy, rather than having all these tutorials that kind of get in the way of the game and stuff, the game is supposed to be simple. It is an old school, retro Commodore 64 style game. Obviously it's not completely Commodore 64, but it's only got two real things that you can do: shoot and dodge. Those are your buttons. So obviously it's not a Commodore 64 game because you only have one button on that controller, but there's only two things you have to teach the player. Most people know what shoot means and the implications of that. Dodge is probably a little trickier, but as long as those two commands get conveyed to the player, and then maybe like the charge shot as well, as long as those three kind of points get conveyed to the player, that's all the tutorial we need. So if we can fit that into this opening, the player walks out, there's an enemy cowboy that walks out, you've got kind of a showdown situation. Enemy, maybe two enemies walk out. Sorry, I don't have the right number of fingers here. But, you've got your player. Obviously, the first thing you want to teach the player is shoot, because that's the most important thing. So, shoots, the enemies duck, so the player kind of understands, wait, there's a ducking mechanic in this game. The bullets then bounce, come back, so that the player understands bullets bounce. Hits one of the enemies, they die. Obviously, that teaches the player that bullets are dangerous. And you're left with one enemy who shoots at you. And then before the bullet hits you, probably have like some prompt to duck. Then when you duck, the bullet whizzes past you. Obviously, it speeds up because that's part of the mechanic too, so the player's going to understand that. Bounces, come back, the player ducks again, and then it hits the enemy. Everything that this game is about can be conveyed with that kind of sequence if I can get it done. Plus, it's kind of a neat opening draw. We'll see how I can do. So the next thing would be probably, I guess it's tutorial. It's not really tutorial. It's still the opening, but I'll call it tutorial because it's originally tutorial. My brain's still not waking up, sorry. It is 8 in the morning in Japan on Saturday, so it's earlier than my brain wants to wake up. So bringing tutorial tasks over here, the first thing would be, I guess, not allowing player input would be one thing. Because, setting up the player to be able to shoot the enemies, I wouldn't want them to just start moving because then it kind of throws that off. Let's see, enemy shoot. Let's see, player shoot. I'm just going to make these all 0.25 because I'm not sure how long they'll take. And some of them will kind of get bunched together. So you got the enemy's dodge, tutorial. Enemy gets hit on the rebound. And then enemy shoots. This one's going to be trickier. Tutorial, bullet pauses in front of player, because that's something I don't usually do with the bullet, so I'm going to have to keep track of that bullet instance as it's going across the screen. Dodge prompt. And let's see, tutorial. And then a dodge prompt on the back end, and then enemy gets hit. Especially if I can get the enemy to fire off like a bullet that's about to explode or something. Those are about the tasks I need, I guess. I do need, oh yes, a shoot prompt, obviously, for the player. And that's going to go up here. And last, I just need to let the player start doing their thing. Player hold. Okay. So that looks like a lot of time. It may actually be a lot of time. We'll find out. I'm not going to worry about labeling them all with game design. I'll do that later, since we should get right into this. So that is, well, let's see. I'll archive this one because I did break it down, so I'll archive that. I won't delete it though. Alright, so here we go. Let's get the player walk to the middle and stop. First I should probably show you where I'm at right now in the game. So it's not going to be much fun if I jump into code and you don't see what I'm actually making. Plus I can show off those dust particles and ask what you guys think. So I am using GameMaker Studio. GameMaker Studio is great for 2D games. It's pretty simple. You can get away with simple games without even using like scripts and things like that, but over time you just kind of, you learn that, you know, all this GUI stuff in here is great, but there's just a lot of stuff you can't do in this GUI. Plus, like these ifs and elses and branching logic start looking really nasty in the GUI, so you end up kind of shifting to scripts over time anyway. But GameMaker news, I guess GameMaker Yo-Yo Games, the people that make it, did get bought. So we'll see what happens to GameMaker over the next couple of months, I guess. Hopefully things stay as they are. So let me show you where we're at in the game right now. Okay. So I think that, should I try bumping up the resolution a little bit for you guys? Let's see if I can squeeze that into my monitor. Okay, yeah, that's good. Alright. So let's see, sound effects, volume, that's all fine. I don't want to blow out your speakers, so here we go. So right now, this is where I would put the ready draw sequence if I could. You can see those dust particles kind of coming off the player's feet and the enemy's feet. Tried to keep them as simple and pixelated as possible to kind of match the atmosphere, but we'll see. Not sure if they actually add to the game or not. They might just kind of make it look like. We'll see. But as you can see, the bullets are bouncing around the screen. And as they bounce, they kind of pick up speed. The faster they are when they hit an enemy, the more points they're worth. You can also dodge. And if you do dodge without getting hit, like I just did, the bullets also speed up. So that's one way you can kind of quickly speed these bullets up to make them worth more points. Of course, the faster they go, the more dangerous they are for you as well. And it's not just fighting enemy cowboys. There's, you know, there's ghost enemies, which obviously, if they're normal ghosts, the bullets go through them, but you have to ring the bell to basically get them upset and then start shooting. There's also the desert level, which is scorpions, another kind of tricky enemy because you can't kill them by hitting them from the front. You just get them upset and they charge you, where they turn red for a little bit, obviously. The only way to kill them is to actually hit them from behind. So that kind of forces you to use the dodge mechanic, or not the dodge mechanic, the rebound mechanic of the pinball game. You can also use these cactus bumpers because they fire as long as they get hit. The next one is the alien level. With this one, there's these crystals set up. The aliens are all shielded, so you can't hit them. The only thing you can hope to do is get them to blast their own shields with these crystals kind of reflecting their lasers, and then the shields go down for a little bit. And you can do your thing. There's the Christmas level, which I made obviously for the Christmas special. Snowmen have three little balls here, so as you hit them, they get faster and faster. If they still have their head, they can still track you. But if you knock off their head, they're fast, but they don't follow you anymore. The Christmas trees also at the moment act exactly like the cacti did, and they fire off ornaments. And the last thing is there is actually a boss that I made as well. And the boss, as you start actually damaging the boss, if you can do it, the boss starts firing off like multiple waves of bullets. So that's the game in a nutshell. And what I want to do now is right here, when you hit start, it just jumps right into the game. Instead of doing that, I want to have, the player kind of walk out onto the screen, enemies walk out onto the screen, have it say, ready, set, draw, and then it gives you the prompt to shoot. You shoot, the two enemies duck, the bullet rebounds, hits the back enemy, and then the remaining live enemy shoots. You get the prompt to duck, you get the prompt to duck, the enemy basically shoots themselves, so you learn everything, and then the game starts, as it is here. So let's get started. First thing is going to be to have the player actually walk out onto the screen, but before I do that, let me check the chat. And Sierra654 says, "Hi, Blue. Hi, back." I did say hey this morning, but you might have jumped out of that chat for a little bit. But glad to see you guys here. PandaVit, Sirius, Torpid Sloth, thank you all for dropping by. And Torpid Sloth mentioned, but the GameMaker news, I'll be really bummed if they end up messing up GameMaker with some silly nickel and dime system. Yeah, I am kind of worried about that too, because they are, let's see if I can remember who they are. GameMaker purchased. No, that's just going to be purchased. I'll just go to my Twitter thing since I did forward the thing. So let's see, jump to tweets. Christmas special. Wait for Santa. Yeah. This news from Gamasutra. Oh yeah, I guess that's other news. I don't know if any of you guys overseas are actually using Line, but if you are, I did make a set of 40 stickers for Line. Let me show those. It's mostly big in Japan and like South America, I think. But there's an application called Line on iPhone, and you can use all these stamps when you're chatting with people. So I made a set because I am living in Japan, so I figured it's a good way to kind of tell my Japanese friends here I'm doing something. So these are all the different stickers you can use. So if you do have Line and you do use stickers, you can go to the Line store, Creators Market, Creators Stickers, and then search for Blue Tengu Lifestyle, and boom, you got them, if you're interested. But let's jump to that news. GameMaker Studio acquired for $16.4 million, nice chunk of change, but the company was Playtech, which is an online gambling software company. Online gambling software company. I would imagine they're pretty good at monetizing stuff and nickeling and diming, because gambling is all about nickeling and diming people. So, as Torpid Sloth mentioned, kind of worried about what they're going to do in the future. For now, they said they're not going to mess with anything. They're not going to mess with a good thing, but that's corporate speak. Every corporation that buys another corporation always says we're keeping the corporation exactly as it is, but they never do. So we'll see exactly what happens. And let me keep going. Torpid Sloth also says the company that bought it makes games like that, so I'm a little worried. Yeah, the nickel and diming games, exactly, because they're trying to use GameMaker Studio to make that. easier for them. So hopefully they don't build their business model into it. But of course, that's what they're going to do eventually. Hopefully at least GameMaker Studio I can keep using it. And PandaBits for the dirt particle says they might need to just be the color of the ground so they show up over the texture, since right now it sticks out pretty harshly on the opening level. Yeah, those particles. I think I did make them, let's see. Yeah, they are the kind of the color of the ground, but the problem is the alpha that goes on top of them kind of makes them a little like muddy, and I can't figure out a way to get around that yet, so I will see. But yeah, you're right. I think that is part of the big problem here, because like when they're over the barrel, they look alright. They do look like, you know, dust, but when they're elsewhere, let's see, my screen is off. I should probably move the resolution back down to make sure I can always keep that screen in the where you guys can see it. But yeah, they do look kind of muddy over the ground, so I'll have to work on that a little bit. And PandaBits mentioned, speaking of big in Japan, Persona 5 came out. Yes, it did. Persona 5. Boom. So, for all of these of you guys who enjoyed Persona 4, that's definitely something you want to check out. So let's get to getting the player out to the middle first. This is going to require timelines and paths. I did look into the paths a little bit, so I should be okay. I'm just going to create a path for the player first. So let's call this path player opening. And what you can do with paths in GameMaker is you can select the room, for example. So since the opening is going to be in the town level, there's my level. Paths are really simple to make. You just basically say where you want to start. So for example, I think I can start off screen. There's collision here on the border, but I should be able to get past it if I'm using a path. We'll see. And let's say I want to walk the player out to here. There's my path. Easy enough. But if you have this closed check, what will happen is the player will walk to the end of the path and then go back because it's a closed thing. That's what you usually use with paths for like enemies who kind of do this thing where they go up and down or they go around in a circle, or you know, whatever you're doing. It's usually a closed path so they can keep going back and forth. You can define whether they go to the end and then loop, or you can define whether they go to the end and go back the other way, reverse. You can do all that stuff, but I'm not going to do that. I just needed the player to get out to the middle and stay there, so I'm going to check this off. So there's my path. Gets the player out to the middle of the screen. While I'm at it, I guess I could try to add an enemy path. Whoops. Not sure what just happened there. I guess before I do anything, I should actually old school back up my project here. I should use source control, but I'm not, because it is just me working on it. And the important thing is to have a backup before each episode, so let's see, before this is episode 34, ready, set, draw, ready, set, game over, sorry. So let's create a path for the enemies. Opening, enemy 01 opening. And same room. And for this one, have the enemy start here, come out to maybe about here. Not a closed path. And I'll duplicate that one for the other enemy. 02 opening. And I'll just move this back a little bit. Maybe there. And that's not closed. Okay, so there's my paths. Let's do a timeline. And Sirius mentioned, back up your project I did yesterday. Yes, Sirius was telling me about his project on Adventure Game Studio. Something happened to corrupt the data and he had to do a lot of stuff over again. I've had that happen so many times on so many projects that yes, I am a little more religious about backing things up now. Probably the thing that finally really got me into backing up was writing, because I do always take place in like NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month in November, write a novel in a month. Definitely want to back that up because otherwise you're not going to reach your goal if you mess up, and you're tired, so usually trying to make that word limit. So backing up, back up as much as possible. If you're using source control, it's usually even better because you back up individual files and you can always go back to the exact ones you want. So let's call this timeline player opening. And I'll show you what timelines are. It looks kind of like, you know, these objects, but what you can do in a timeline is you can add, well, it says indicate the moment. Unfortunately, you can't say special because it doesn't allow that. It only allows numbers. GameMaker's heartless that way. What you do is you put in the frame. So 0 is the start frame, so you could say right when this path starts, what do I want to have happen? I want to set the path for the player, which is player opening. For speed, the player has a variable called player base speed, which is the speed that can move around the screen. That's a little too fast, so I'm going to divide that by 2, at least for now, see how it goes. And when you're using a path, at the end you could say continue from start, which means you get to the end of the path and then start over at the beginning and redo it. You kind of jump to the beginning. Continue from here just means you keep kind of going from there, obviously. Reverse means you go back to the beginning of the path, kind of loop around. It's the same thing as using like a closed path in some ways, but I just want the player to stop. And I don't want relative, I want absolute, because I don't want them to, you know, the relative would make them move that much to the right, no matter where the player was. In this case, I want them to move exactly where I defined it, you know, exactly from that point in the room to the middle of the room. So that's that. You know, I may not even need to use a timeline for something this simple, but we'll see. Because to be honest, when they get to the end of the path, that's when I want stuff to happen, but we'll see. Maybe it's easier to kind of create timing and stuff in here. The other thing would be, I guess, have the enemy player opening. I guess I should just duplicate this. Part of me thinks I should get the timeline working with the player first to make sure that I need this in the first place. But and I think enemies have EM base speed as well. That's pretty slow, so I think they'll be okay. And duplicate that. The only difference with this one is it's the second path. Kind of wasting a lot of timelines here, but yeah. I can always worry about efficiency later. The important thing first is to get things working, and then I can clean up later, because I probably don't even really need to make 2 separate timelines, but we'll see. The next thing you want to do with the timeline is make sure that the player actually uses it. In the player's case, it's pretty easy because I can just do it at the end of create. So let's see, there should be something in here to run a timeline. Set timeline, timeline position, timeline speed. So you've got all these, you know, UI versions of the timeline controls. I just want to set it. So player opening, position 0 in the timeline. Start immediately. Yeah, and don't loop, that's fine. Because the game doesn't have some big long loading thing before it gets into a new level, so I think start immediately should be okay. Alright, well, let's see what happens. Let's see if the player actually walks to the middle of the screen when the level starts. I'll still be able to control the player, so, you know, it's not ideal, but like he'll probably look at my mouse pointer while he's coming out here, but interesting. Well, that did not work. Okay. PL base speed divided by 2, stop, absolute. That's fine. Did I mess this up? Is it because of this? Let me try bumping it out into the room a little more. Should be okay. PL path opening. There we go. Okay, so the collision was getting in the way. I guess if there's collision there, it doesn't want to jump the player to that spot. Maybe if I move it even past the collision? Because that's a solid object, and GameMaker doesn't like putting things inside of solid objects, obviously. Yeah, so The path obviously does respect the collision, so if I wanted to get around that, I could just say, not use paths and say, x plus blah 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 until he comes out to the middle, because then it'll ignore collision. But I don't think I want to do that. As long as I use a fade, this should be enough for me. Just start him on this side of the collision so he actually walks out. So I guess I'm going to need to fix the enemies too. In fact, let's do it like this, so that the enemies don't run into each other. Okay, let's see where I am. And Decent Scrimp dropped by, said sorry for being late, time to get decent up in here. Yes, be decent, Decent Scrimp. You should have fun with this episode, because I think you mentioned the Sinistar Run Coward voice last week. I've got my own version of that I'm going to try and pop in here. I don't say Run Coward because the cowboy's not a coward, but I do my own thing. So, okay, the player walks out to the middle of the screen. Relative middle, I suppose. He does kind of walk over that barrel collision, which looks pretty bad, so let me just bump this up a little bit. Probably don't want snapping. Let's see, was it Alt? Okay, if you hold Alt and move, it won't snap to the grid. You can also change how much it snaps by this stuff. In fact, let me do that. Just make it a little more precise. And let's snap it. Okay. Alright, let's just make sure it looks okay before moving on to the next step. Okay, well that looks decent, as Decent Scrimp would say. So, we got that going. The next thing is, I guess, making sure the player can't do anything while he's walking out. So let's see, get the player to walk to the middle and stop. Well, that wasn't too bad. That wasn't too bad. Alright. Display ready, set, draw. Let's do that a little later. Let's move not allowing player input up first. So that's a little more important. So let's see, what should I do to do that? I may already have something that does that. In fact, yes. When I do come back from the pause, let me show you if I can. When I come back from pausing, I actually do have something that freezes the player control just for a little bit, and there's a reason for that. Let's get to this. Walks out to the middle, all done. So like if I pause and I go back into the game, it's almost impossible to see because I made it as unnoticeable as possible. But you see this little debug message that says unfreezing player. I froze the player because if the player clicks on something on the pause screen, and there's a lot of things that register buttons and key presses and things like that. So if the player does press enter or something on the pause screen and comes back into the game, for example, it could cause them to shoot the moment they get back into the game, which is not what they wanted. So I just freeze the player just for a couple of frames when coming back into the game to make sure that doesn't happen. So I do already have this freeze the player thing that I can do, which is good. So let's put that in the timeline. Hopefully I can get away with that. So that's just that PL freeze. Set that to true. And I guess just so I don't forget, what should I do? So I'm going to need at some point for the player not to just be frozen, but to have their movement frozen, but still able to shoot. But I think I can do some of that in another way. We'll see. We'll see. So 120. It's unfortunate that I can't define these by rim speed, so that's one disadvantage to using the timeline, I guess. Can I? Let's see. Can I say rim speed? No. Okay. Well, that's one drawback to using timelines. You're kind of locked into a frame rate. If I decided for some reason, wow, look at all my particle effects, I don't want this to run at 60 frames per second, I want it to run at 30 so I can process all that stuff, then everything in the timeline would take twice as long. So that's one drawback to using timeline. Anywhere else you can always say room speed and it just automatically calculates, how many frames per second for you, but in timeline you can't get away with that. So it's one caveat to using timeline versus alarms and your own stuff. But just to make sure the player can fight back when this is done, I'll have to change the step value later, but let's see what happens. Okay, so for about 2 seconds, the player wasn't able to move no matter what. So that's working. It's still following the mouse cursor. So I guess I should do something about that. Where do I do that stuff? If the player isn't frozen, process, mouse, begin, end, draw. Determine sprite to draw. Just trying to figure out where I'm doing that. Having the player look at the mouse thing, I thought I was doing it in here. Yeah, because I'm doing it in here. If player freeze equals false, but since I have player freeze false out here, that's kind of redundant to be doing that. I guess I should get rid of that. Indent, okay. Yeah, this is the part that updates the player direction, so I'm not entirely sure why the player is able to follow the mouse even though they're supposed to be frozen. I can worry about that later, I guess. I'll put that in my task list. I don't think I'll be able to get to it today, but I'll figure it out. Debug, player follows mouse cursor while frozen. I don't imagine it would take too long to find that out, but just in case. So let's see. Input stopped, but I'm going to need to figure out a way to get them to shoot. I guess I do have them frozen, but I'll keep that task down here. I will start to put in the text. So display ready set draw, because that's going to be all on the timeline. So let's see, where should I put that? Does this have draw functions? Yeah, I guess it makes sense, because this timeline, everything that's happening in here is happening inside of player, so I'm calling the player's draw function. So first thing, let's change this to, let's change this to something bigger, like 300. So that would be 5 seconds. Let's add a new step in here. It seems to take the player about 180 to get to the middle. This is why I hate using like actual frames, because it's much easier to just use events and stuff like that. So at the end, I may not use timelines, but we'll see. Let's draw text. Ready. And room width. I don't want to do room width. View. Let's see if I can remember what it is. W view, I think. Because I'll explain the difference between like room width and view, W view again. But let's do that in the middle. View. Width, height, H view. Hopefully I remembered what those variables were called. Draw scale text, sprite, background, vertical. Well, there we go. I guess I have to worry about it myself. Alright, so we'll add script. Draw set. Trying to remember these functions all the time. H-align. Alright, there we go. FA center. Okay, so that should center the text where it's being drawn, which is hopefully in the middle, if I got those variable names right. Let me show you what the difference is between room width and view really quick. So like in these rooms, to allow enemies to come from the left side of the screen into the stage, what I've done is I've shifted all of the actual play stage over a little bit. Well, let's see. Yes, okay, that works. just making sure my fingers match up to what's on my screen. But, I shift the room over, so the room width would get me, it's still kind of the middle, because the room is somewhat balanced. I should probably balance it out because that would make things better, but it would get the middle of this giant square. So the width is 368, it would give me half of that. But if I use the view, what I can get is, it starts at 24. You can see kind of by this outline here. It starts at 24, ends over here. It ends at 344, so 320 pixels wide. So when I get 320, I'm getting that. And so what that means is I can ignore the size of the room. I just have to worry about what's in the camera. And I want the text to be in the middle of what the player's seeing, so using the view is probably the right way to go with that. So that's the path. I don't need these paths anymore. Let me call those. Now here's something. I wonder how this timeline's going to work with text. Because usually when you draw something, when you call a draw function, it only works for that step. So what'll probably happen is the text won't even appear. Or it'll appear for a frame, but that's too short to see. Let's see what happens. I'm sure the text won't show up properly. Yeah. So timelines are not as useful as I was expecting them to be. That's kind of unfortunate, because otherwise I would have to spread out the moments. I guess I could use one of these spread commands. Duplicates moments. Yeah, I guess I just have to do it this way. This is going to look horrible. But since I have to call this draw text function every single step, if I want to have it on the screen for a second, that means I have to have 30 of these steps, I think. Torpid Sloth and you other guys out there, if you do know of a better way to do this, definitely let me know in terms of timelines. Maybe there is something in timeline that allows you to do it without filling this moments thing up, but we'll see. From moment, till moment, to moment. What is the difference between till moment and to moment? From moment, to moment, till moment. Okay. Till and to. All right. Let's see. Timeline from moment, till moment, to moment. What the heck does that? All right. I guess there's not a lot of people using timelines, so from moment till moment. I guess I should add GameMaker. Well, I guess we'll just see. I'm not sure what the difference between these two is, so I'll just make them both 210, see what happens. Oh, well, awesome. It didn't create a whole bunch of junk in between here, which is good. And so one of these, I think, is just copy from here to here, means you only copy one step. If you use till, then it fills it out. Okay, got it. All right, one of these copies everything from a step into another step. The other one fills it. Wait a minute. Hey, why isn't it filling this out for me? That's odd. So I was expecting these steps to be kind of filled in. Spread out the moments, adding additional time between them. All right, let's try this one. Maybe this is what I want. No. That's something else. Merge. I don't want to merge moments. Well, alright, let's just jump in the game and see if this is magically doing something behind the scenes for me. I'm not sure. It's not what I expect, so I doubt it. Yeah, the text isn't showing up, so much for that. Duplicate. Let's try this again. Duplicate from moment till moment to moment. Ah, got it. Okay, now I finally understand what from until means. From moment till moment is the range you want to copy. To is where you want to copy it to. So it's not going to do exactly what I need it to do, unfortunately, because it's just going to do that. It's not going to fill out the middle for me. Wow. Wow, that's awful. That is not useful at all, because I would have to fill in all of these by myself. Wow, that's not what I want to do. So let's do something else. Let's let the system handle the drawing of the text. So let's let the system handle it. Ready. Sys_text ready. Set it to true. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tell system draw that text for me until I tell it to not draw that text. Let's just do it that way, because I don't want to have 600 steps in there and then have to delete them or add them or whatever if I want to change timing. That's ridiculous. So let's do draw in here. Wow, what a nasty way to have to do this. I'm starting to think timelines are not the way to go, but we'll see. Well, alright, object's fine. It is itself, so sys_text ready. If that's true, then we'll draw the text. You know what, I probably want to do this in script. So switch, and I'll just create one variable for this. So switch text opening. So that means I'm going to break this out. If text opening is 1, then draw text ready. Draw set h_align fa center. What else do I need? Draw set font. What are my choices here? Fonts. Let's do a new one. Font announce. Let's add that font in here. Create font. Grab my Commodore 64 font that I've been using. Call it font announce. Make it nice and big. Okay. And that's what happens if the case is 1. If case is 2, then draw set. Well, let's copy this over. Okay, there we go. So that'll take my sys_text opening variable, which I'll create from now. And if it's 1, it'll say ready. If it's 2, it'll say set. If it's 3, it'll say draw. Guess I do need to put the coordinates here. So view, page view. Oh, that's the start. I don't want H view. I want W view. There we go. Divided by 2. View, view, height view. Divided by 2. Okay. Alright, let's see what this does. Need to make that variable really quick. Sys_text opening. And by default it's 0, which is fine. In fact, let's change the variable name to sys_text announce. Even better. Let's get rid of this extra stuff. Okay. Keep it all consistent. And jump back up to the timeline. And now instead of setting it to true, I set sys_text_announce to 1. So at that point, it should draw ready in the middle of the screen until I change that. So to change that, let's go add a second, so 240. Well, I guess here I can use it. So 300. Set it to 3. Add a new step, 360. Well, alright, let's keep it as it is now. Let's unfreeze the player when that final thing comes up. And let's see what happens. And Torpitsloff mentions never use timelines either. And the Grim Gary jumped in. Welcome, Grim Gary. Always proceed GameMaker searches with GameMaker. Always brings up something. Yeah, I did make that mistake here when I was searching stuff before. I just said timeline from moment till moment, and that's probably bringing up people's like scrapbooks and stuff like that. I should have said GameMaker in the beginning as well, because there's GameMaker at least has a lot of information about it. So usually most things you can find in GameMaker are always going to hit something here. And there's, I guess the Japanese page would have told me what was going on. I would have said timeline ではある時間が経過した時に発生する動作を何回も定義することができます。発生する動作. Yeah, this would have actually told me what from moment till moment means. So, yeah, thank you, Grim Gary. I do need to do that when I do my searches. Always make sure I have GameMaker and there's a keyword. And Sierra says, yay, learning. Yeah, learning things the hard way, but that's the fun way to learn things. So let's see what happens. Text is still not being drawn, so that's no good. That's interesting. Oh, well, there we go. Ready, set. Okay, well, there's my text. Let's see. It's in the middle of the screen. Yeah, I guess it is kind of centered in the middle of the screen. It's just not centered in the middle of the view. So I need to offset it a little bit. I also need to change the color to the proper color, which is Commodore 64 dark blue, something like that. I'm going to see what my other text is using for color. So I need to look at scripts, but it's kind of working. At least that was the right way to go with that stuff, instead of filling out every single one of those steps in the timeline. Settings, globals. Alright, let's look at my Commodore font name. I think I'm just using blue, dark blue. So I need to change my text color to that inside of system. Almost got to my crazy synthesized voice. Draw. And there's a reason I'm not using Draw GUI, which is probably the way you would usually do it, because I am doing a lot of stuff with surfaces, so Draw is kind of what I want to be doing. So one thing I need to do is offset it. So let's see, XView. XView will get me the start of where the screen begins, or the view begins. So I need to add that into this, otherwise it just takes that 320 divides it by 2, which ends up shoving it off to the left a little bit. So that's the first order of business, making sure the text displays in the center. I guess just to be on the safe side, I could do the same with the horizontal view. Right now there's nothing above, but maybe in the future there will be, so it's probably safer to just add that in, because it'll probably just be 0, but at least if I add it in, I never have to worry about it again, no matter what I do. And let's see, set font, draw text color. And that's the one thing, just an aside, I love about GameMaker is it allows both the British version and the American version. since I'm American, I will go with the non-U version, even though the one with the U looks a lot cooler. And yes, I know it's the wrong number of arguments to the script. I just want it to show me what it needs. Okay, well, fine. I will look it up then. Maybe if I use the British version, it'll give me a hint. Well, that's awesome. If I use the British version, it gives me the proper hint. So that's nice. So I guess I have to go British to get my hint down here. I should bring the window up to show you what I'm talking about. Down here at the bottom, it says draw text color, and that gives me exactly what I need to fill in. If I use the American version, the American spelling, it doesn't give me anything. So, advantage UK. I will use the British version until I figure out the parameters I need. So, alright. I need to put in that global C64, Commodore 64 blue color. And alpha is just 1, because I want it to show up nice and dark. And just to get them back, I'm going to delete that U. Alright. I don't want to be a poser. I don't want to pretend that I'm a sophisticated British guy. I'm a very unsophisticated American. So I will use the non-U version. But hint if you're using GameMaker, British spellings are the way to go, I guess. Alright, that should get the text in the middle of the screen. Now the timing was definitely weird. So I need to change these. Let's try 120, 150. Let's try 150. 180, 210. Let's move this one to 210. And let's do 270 on this one. Okay. Let's just make sure the text shows up properly. And the Grim Gary says you could use the timeline to switch a global string rather than rely on the timeline to constantly draw a string. Yeah, that's actually a good idea. Actually, that's a great idea. Well, let's see. What am I doing wrong here? I'll keep that great idea. Hold on a second. In system and draw event. Okay, so I'm just missing a parenthesis somewhere. Okay. It's just exactly where I need to go anyway. So, the Grim Gary in chat did mention you could use timeline to switch global string, which is actually a great idea because then I don't have to worry about, the case statement. If 1, then draw this. If 2, then draw this. Also, it'll help with localization later too. So thank you for that great idea. Because then, instead of doing this, all I have to do is this. And get rid of all of that. And I can say sys_text_announce, put the variable in there, and boom, it'll just draw that. As long as, I should say, yeah, I'll put the if on the outside, just so it's clear when I'm debugging later. So if sys_text_announce is not just a blank string, then you have to draw it on the screen. So I need to change this to just this. Yeah, wonderful idea. Thank you. You are awesome. That saves me a lot of steps, and I can use it whenever I want to later as well. So that does that. Let's see, what else was I doing wrong? Let's see, I had the error displaying. I had that. That's fine. Okay. So now I just need to change sys_text_announce up in the timeline. Here we go. So I'll do ready, set, draw in here. And one other thing I do need to do is, let's see, 330, that's about a second later, if my speed is going 60 frames per second. And I'm going to need to make sure to change that back to an empty string, because otherwise draw will just stay on the screen forever. Okay, let's check that out. And Cirrus mentions everyone talks about strings. I have to learn about them. As soon as I check this out, I will I will give you a quick lesson on strings. Ready, set, draw. A second is a really long time. So I do need to shrink those times down a bit. It's pretty close to what I need. Obviously I need to stop the enemies coming into the room and stuff like that as well, but on the right track. Let's get to strings. Let me show you what a string is. What a string is well, Cirrus, you are doing C and C++ stuff right now, so I will explain it in those terms. What it is in C, C++, as you know, you can have ints, which are, let's use Notepad instead of Paintbrush, so you guys can actually read what I'm writing. You have, int C, float D, char, which is character E, and then you have like string F. What an integer is obviously, -1, -0, 356, all those things. And as long as it doesn't have anything after a decimal, it's an integer. If it's a float, it's, it can do all this stuff. You can have all these integers. So why would you ever want to use an integer when you have the power of a float? Well, there's a couple of reasons. The main reason is memory. If you only need numbers without decimals, the computer can store these in a lot less space than it can store these things in, because it has to keep that room available for all these possible decimal points. So if you're only using 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, then you're better off going with an integer because it takes less memory. But that's enough about numbers. You wanted to talk about strings. With character, all that stores is one character, one single character. So for example, A is a character. In memory, what this is behind the scenes, it's probably something, like, 126 or something. All it's storing is this, because the computer knows if you get 126, then display this, which happens to be A or something. I'm not sure exactly which number it is, but that's what's going on behind the scenes. When you get a string, what a string really is it's basically an array of these characters. So if you have a string with hello world, what's basically going on is you've got, an array of, well, let's just say 20, all right. You're basically ending up with something like this. You've got, however many characters you need. You've got the character for H, then the next one is E, L, L, O, world. So string is just an easier way of saying that. And, when you have a string, sometimes you do have to remember, depending on the language that you're using, that a string is kind of this array format. But what this does is, because the string is kind of stored in that way, you can do things like searching inside of a string, getting a small part of the string, adding to the string, things like that. So that's what a string is. It's just text, basically. Usually, like in GameMaker, you don't have to worry about arrays and stuff like that. It's just text. But if you are working in C like you are, then you kind of have to worry about the fact that it is this special thing. So I hope that helped. Let me jump back into this. So I also need something that tells my enemies not to come out. That would be a good thing, because the player can't move, and if the enemies can start shooting, that's really bad. So that would probably be a good next step. I think room manager, do I have an enemy manager? Is it all in here? I think it's all in room manager. So at the room start, I start the spawn array, play the start jingle cue, the music alarm, initialize the obstacle, set the alarm for their first enemy spawn. So there's when my first enemy comes out. So when I set alarm 0 to something, that is when the enemies first start coming out. So I'm not always going to want to do the ready, set, draw thing. So what I should probably do is, if rm spawn is true, alright, I guess I could set that rm spawn is true. Well, I'm just trying to think of what's the most logical place to put this so that, months down the line I know where to come to when I'm doing this. Let's jump into the script for enemy spawning, because that may be where I need to put it. Enemy spawn. So this is what actually spawns the enemies in the game. Basically it says if I want to spawn a snowman, then spawn the snowman. Create an instance of a snowman at this spot. But that's spawning. I want spawn array. So the spawn works with this data. And Cirrus did say, cool, yes, it did help. Well, I'm glad I could help. Strings are an easy concept. Once you remember that they're just an array of characters, you're pretty much set to go. And the Grim Gary says, keep in mind that GameMaker stores numbers as real, which dynamically switches between int and float depending on the value. Yes, good point. What I was talking about was with numbers. In C, for example, you can decide whether it's just an integer or a float. In fact, that's one of the things with C that makes it so powerful and so difficult at the same time. Unlike a lot of languages, well, like for example, GameMaker language, with pure C and C++, you have to decide everything. But what that does is it gives you the power to decide everything as well. You can decide, I never want to use this number as a float. I always want to use it as an integer. And I want to save this much memory by doing that. You can also do pointers and work directly with memory and all that stuff as well. Makes C powerful, but very difficult to learn at the same time. But once you learn C, any other language is no problem. And what the Grim Gary said is that GameMaker behind the scenes, when you say like a number, in fact, GameMaker really does a job. All variables are basically kind of like, if you've ever done like Visual Basic or things like that, it's usually the moment you say this that behind the scenes it says, oh, okay, this is a string. So in the future, if I say x is 1, it'll say, what are you doing? What are you doing? GameMaker takes it a step further and just does this for me, for example, if it was a string behind the scenes. So what the Grim Gary was mentioning is that GameMaker decides what the number is for you on the fly. So if you say x is 1, GameMaker goes, okay, this is an integer. If in the future you do like 1 point blah blah blah, then it switches it to like float for you, which is what makes GameMaker, much easier to get started in than something like C, because you don't have to worry about a lot of that stuff. But you can also hang yourself, because if you don't realize that stuff, then you can make mistakes like this. You're always expecting x to be an integer, but at some weird point you decide to do this. And then somewhere later you do like this. And then at that point GameMaker finally goes, whoa, 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 what's going on? What is this? If you were using C, which is a strongly typecast language, the moment you do this, C would say, yeah, whoa, 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 you're not using this right, stop. Of course, there are times when that doesn't happen, so it causes problems like pointers and things like that, but that's what makes scripting languages easy on one hand, and then easy to hang yourself on the other hand. Because if you explicitly state stuff, you know what you're doing. I don't think GameMaker has something like that, but like Visual Basic does have, when you're making Excel macros and stuff like that, it does have something where it says when you define a type, you have to define the type. It's an option, but you have to define the type, and if you disobey that type, then it'll send an error. That's actually good scripting practice to turn that option on, because then you won't make mistakes like that in the future. But let's get into this. So if it's level 1, then that's the only level where I really want this delay to happen. So RM spawn is true. Let's turn that to false. So it'll never start spawning enemies until I set this to true. And where I can set this to true is in this timeline. I can set RM spawn inside of Room Manager to true. So that's when enemies should start coming out. Let's see if that works. Let's make sure it works. But thank you, Grim Gary. You've given great advice so far. It's great to have you on the chat. You saved me a lot of trouble with the announcement text thing too in the future, which is awesome. Okay, so we wait a little bit. Ready, set, and as you can see, none enemies are coming out yet. And draw went away, so now the enemies should start spawning if everything went right. If everything went right, it did not. And the reason for that is I forgot something, which is system create. Where is it? Is it system create? No, it's in step. Oh, room manager, blah. Okay, room manager create. Room manager creates step. No, it isn't steps. It should be okay. Oh, okay, it's 1. Alright. I was just using it wrong. See? Exactly. It illustrates exactly the point I was talking about with bad typing causing problems. Let's fix that and I'll explain. Boom. Let's see, I was using this as false, but let's do 0. In fact, I'm only using it as false and true, so false and true, room manager. Okay, step. If, alright, enemy spawn pattern, let's, if that's true, if enemy spawn is true, then set enemy spawn to false. Actually, behind the scenes, GameMaker should have been switching these to 0 and 1 for me anyway, so that might not have been the problem. But we'll see. And that is in steps, so as soon as RM enemy spawn is set to true, that should kick off. Oh, I just misspelled the variable. Alright. It's not a typing thing, because GameMaker does do typing behind the scenes. What I was thinking was, because I have done that in the past in GameMaker, but thankfully GameMaker does do dynamic stuff for you. So I was doing this, well, I thought I was doing this. RM enemy spawn equal to like 1, and then later checking if RM enemy spawn is equal to 1, true. I thought I was doing some mistake like this where 1 wouldn't know what it is, but GameMaker by default says true is equal to 1 and false is equal to 0. So GameMaker would have handled that. My mistake was saying this, which obviously all it did was create a new variable inside of room manager called RM spawn, which never got used because it's looking for enemy spawn. That was the only problem with that. Alright, so I jumped the gun on that one, but in most languages that would have been a typing mistake, for example. GameMaker is very friendly in that way. Ready, set, go. And the enemies are coming. Perfect. Okay. Now we got that delay going. So, before I put the voice in the game, what I am going to do is I am going to take a quick break because, kind of reached the hour mark. So I'm going to play the animation that I always play every week. It should be about, 6 minutes or so before I come back. For those of you who haven't seen the show before, it's going to be weird. Even if you have seen the show before, it's weird, but that's part of the fun of it. So I'm going to play that animation, take my break, grab my water, fill my voice back up to top, and I'll be right back. Thank you for hanging in with me, and Pandabits, Cirrus, Decent, Scrimp, and Grim Gary, thank you for jumping into the chat. The rest of you guys who are watching this, feel free to jump in the chat at any time. And if you're working on your own stuff, definitely, throw a link up in that feed. I don't disable links or anything, so if you're working on something and you want to show it off, definitely throw it up there. So I will be right back. Thank you for waiting while I took that quick break. I guess I lost most of you through it, so I'm not sure if I lost you because Twitch is being flaky or if that turns you off so bad that you all left the room. But for those of you watching this video on YouTube, obviously that was the video that played at the beginning of the episode. I guess I should mention, but for those of you who didn't catch the intro, this is Blue Tengu's live game development show where we show everything that goes into making a game from concept to completion. All the information about where you can find us is in the Twitch info down below if you're watching the live stream, or in our YouTube profile for those of you catching us later. But we're at www.bluetengu.com, btengu on Twitter, facebook.com Blue Tengu Studio, youtube.com Blue Tengu Studio for those of you watching the live stream now, and Twitch TV Blue Tengu for those of you watching us on YouTube if you want to catch the live stream, which we do from Japan live from Japan, big in Japan. No, not really. Saturday 8 to 10, and that translates into, let me get my times here. That translates into 3 to 5 Pacific Friday evenings, 4 to 6 Mountain, 5 to 7 Central, 6 to 8 Eastern, 11 p.m. on Friday night to 1 a.m. if you're in the UK, and then 8 to 10 obviously Saturday morning if you're here in Japan with me, or starts 8 to 10 Saturdays in Australia, or starts at 11 in New Zealand. But the game we're making today, well, this season, is Project Spaghetti, a top-down 2D cowboy shooter where the bullets fired bounce around the screen with the pinball mechanic, and right now I'm trying to get kind of a mix of a tutorial and an introduction opening kind of animation sequence going. Going pretty good so far. Let me jump to the desktop. And I'm using GameMaker, obviously. So right now where I'm at is when you run the game, I'm at to the point where the player does walk out to the middle of the screen, text gets displayed, ready, set, draw, and then enemies start to appear. So I'm doing all that through timelines. So the next thing I need to do, well, I guess the very first thing I should do is adjust those times, because that ready kind of shows up a little late. So let's do 120. And let's do half a second increments. So I don't want to keep the player waiting. I want to avoid that as much as possible. So there we go. That'll speed things up. The next thing is to do the synthesized voice thing. What's unfortunate, I guess, is that Decent Scrimp isn't here, so you can't hear me do the Sinistar voice thing, but I guess for the rest of you, or if you want to catch the video later, I'll go through it. What I did to make my voice the way I wanted it to. In fact, let me let you hear the final results here. So, sorry if this is loud, by the way. You might want to check your speakers, and if you're at work or something, you might want to make sure the volume's down, just in case this is really loud. But I've got... Ready! Well, alright, let's not loop it. Ready, set, and draw. Kind of an old school synthesized voice thing. I was thinking about using the... there's a Commodore 64 voice emulator plugin that works inside of, like, yeah, it's a VST plugin, so you can type voice and it spits out voice, but it doesn't seem to pronounce some of these things well enough for you to understand what they are, so I decided to do the voice myself. If you want to hear the original that I used, use a free program called Audacity. All I did was hit record, use the microphone, and did this. Ready, set, draw. And that's what I sound like, apparently. It's always hard to hear your own voice, but that was the original thing. And what I did to this was, there was someone with a great little bit of a tutorial here. On Instructables.com, make robot voices using Audacity. Basically, I've got all these in notes, but let me follow my notes and show you exactly how I did this, in case you're interested in doing it as well. If you ever want to record your voice or record sounds and do interesting things with it, Audacity is one way to go. But let's see, I did effect change pitch, so go down to here to change pitch, and I dropped the percent by 14%.
Ready, set.
Makes me sound a lot cooler. My voice is way too high. I wish I sounded like this in real life. So I dropped my pitch to make me sound a little cooler, and then added some echo. Besides, the lower pitch will help with robot voice anyway. And added a delay time of 0.015 and a decay factor of 0.65. So that changes it to this.
Ready, set, draw.
Not bad, getting there. Went even further with the guy's instructions, which were, the next thing is to change the tempo to kind of stretch it out a little bit. So just a little drop by 10%, so it kind of drags it out. Kind of adds to that lowering the pitch thing as well.
Ready, set, draw.
Getting there. And then the last thing I did was, did the echo thing again. All the settings are still there from last time, so I did that exactly as instructed. And I got
Ready, set, draw.
Got those three things. I split them out into files so that I could use them in GameMaker. One other thing you can do, if you do want to make it sound even more retro, it didn't quite, I don't know, I was kind of up in the air about it, but one other thing you can do as well is use something called a bit crusher. I grabbed CMT bit crusher, which is, if I can, did I get rid of it? All right, let me just look it up really quick for you guys. For example, it says best free bit crusher. Believed it. Let's see, best free. There's a whole bunch of bit crushers, but the one I used was CMT because this guy recommended it, so it's like, okay, that's fine. And I used CMT bit crusher, which is just at d.pr/f/ydio. Grabbed that, popped it into the Audacity plugins folder. So I just dropped it into here. See, there it is, CMT bit crusher 2. And to make sure that it activated, I went down to here, edit preferences, effects, and then I checked this box, rescan VSTFX next time Audacity is started, closed the program, jumped in, found it just fine, and then it was here. What the bit pressure, it's off the screen, unfortunately. This is where having a small monitor is not going to be very good, but let me take a screenshot and show you exactly what I'm seeing here. The workarounds I have to do. So the effect menu, it's here at the bottom. There it is. See, CMT bit crusher 2. So it's there, trust me. It's just off my screen. And what you can do with that is you can make it sound a little more retro robotic. Like you can drop how high quality it is, basically. You can downsample it. So it makes it sound kind of, grainy and nasty, which is, could be exactly what you want. In fact, that wasn't actually too bad. But if you use a bit crusher, you can do that. So those are some Audacity things, but at the end of the day, what I got was, these individual files, and I'll drop those into GameMaker. Sirius says he uses Audacity all the time. Yeah, I'm still getting used to it. I guess because I've been mostly doing music stuff instead of sound stuff, and most of my sound effects came from BFXR, which is a great program. But Audacity is definitely powerful. Great free tool. How have you been using Audacity, Sirius? Definitely let me know. I know you've been grabbing sounds and stuff, so you definitely probably know more about it than I do. But I got my sounds, so I'm going to drop those in. Let me put these in the Project Spaghetti folder so it's all kind of in one place. Ready, set, draw. See inside of sound effects. Okay. So I'm going to drop those sounds in. I'm sorry, Decent Scrimp, you missed out. But sounds, create group, SFX group, announce. Yeah, let's just call it announce. I'm not going to have variations, I don't think, so create a sound. And grab those. I'll put it in Project Spaghetti, sound effects, ready, set, draw. And I'm not sure which one I want to use. I guess I'll go with OGG. Okay. That's fine. Let's just make sure it plays. I can't play OGG files directly. Alright. Well, that's fine. In fact, let's just go with the WAV, because I'm using WAV files for everything else. I'll think about whether I go with OGG files or WAV files in the future. Obviously, OGG is all compressed, so it's going to take up less space, so I probably will use those in the future, but here we go.
Ready.
Got my ready. So SFX, announce, ready. There we go. Let's just duplicate this to make it easy. Announce, set, and set. And SFX, announce, draw. And I like the draw long version. These might be a little too loud because everything else is kind of toned down a little bit, so let's tone these down a bit. They should be a little louder than other sounds, so let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's put it at 6. That's fine. That's fine. Okay. So I should be able to use those now. And the script I use to play sounds to make sure that I'm not doing weird things is this one. So SCR play sound effects. So I need to add that stuff into my timeline. So when ready appears, all I have to do is play that script. Sound, play sound effects, and I called it SFX announce ready. And I think I need to add 0 as a parameter. Ready, set, and draw. Okay, let's see if that's what I needed to do. And PandaBits came back. Eternal Pizza Friday stealing my time. Oh, yes, you made another pizza. Yes, awesome. I loved hearing about your pizza when you made it that one time. That's an awesome tradition to make pizza every Friday. Oh man, that sounds awesome. I wish I lived next door so I could grab a piece. Dying for good pizza in Japan, obviously. What pizza did you make today? I'm just kind of curious. Make me hungry. And you said the dough is done so you're free. Well, welcome back. What I did, I kind of went through making a synthetic voice in Audacity. Well, I guess I did go through it. You'll hear it. But I basically recorded my voice saying ready, set, draw, and then added a bunch of effects in Audacity to it so that I got, kind of a ready, set, draw kind of synthetic voice. And I just popped those into the timeline now, so here we go. Hopefully they play. Okay, well I messed up on the parameters. Alright, alright, yeah, I need to add it in. Well, let's see, do I? I don't know, maybe I could get away with just this. Now, I do need to use it because I have this global volume setting, and that's why I always go through this script to play sound effects. So, alright, let's just do that. So what I need to do is, where do I have my sounds? Sound table, there we go, makes sense. So I need to make a table for this, even though it's just one sound effect. Announce sound effects table. So ready, announce ready. Okay. Yeah, I guess I should put a number on it. Let me do that. I don't need to do a count thing here because I know it's going to be 0, so I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to make the ones I need. So ready, set, draw. And then I just need to change the names of those sound effect files. Rename, ready, 1. Set, 1. And draw, 1. Okay. I think this will be enough. I may have to make that number 1 instead of 0, but let's find out. Hopefully I don't get the error this time. Let's see, get announce ready. Okay, I need to call it global. My bad. Sorry for all the false starts. Some nice awkward debugging moments for you guys. Where am I doing that timeline? Okay, so I need to say global in front of all these because it's in the sound table. Now, which means it can no longer find those variables. This should do it.
Ready, set, draw.
Okay. And I think I do need to up the volume on that a little bit, but it's working. That's awesome. Let's comparatively, compared to a gunshot, it needs to be a little louder. So let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's go 6 from the right. in terms of volume setting. Okay, let me just check the volume really fast. Need to balance all of the sounds because they're obviously made in different programs and stuff like that, so I have to balance them on my side on top of adding like the user's volume setting, the player's volume setting.
Ready, set, draw.
Got it. All right. So, I got a couple things done there. Let me check my task list. So I've got the opening. It does display ready, set, draw. That's fine. The player does walk to the middle of the screen. That's cool. Got my sound effects in there. That's cool. Not allowing player input. Yes, that is half working. I do need to worry about the shooting and the dodging stuff. But I guess next what I should do is get the enemy to come out there. So let's see. I guess I didn't put that in here, but the enemy needs to come out. So let's add that in here. 1, 2, 5, opening. Enemies walk out to the middle. That shouldn't take long because it's just creating an enemy instance and bringing them out there. And let me just check on that pizza from Panda Bits. I want to be hungry. All right. Sirius mentions we want to make pretzel bread. Oh, that sounds so good too. Pretzels. Oh, there's no pretzels in Japan. Oh, yes, that sounds very good. And Sirius asked Pandavits, do you make your own sauce? And Pandavit said, well, the dough's easy. 2 cups warm water in a warmed mixing bowl, also known as 10-minute flat focaccia. And Pandavits, Sirius gave a website called pizzamaking.com/forum. So if you're interested in pizza making, that's one site you can go to. And Pandavit says it's fine as a regular bread, but it's also good for a pizza base. Works quite well and needs not a lot. Tengu, you two from the land of Japan can make your own dough, easy as pie, pizza pie. Okay. I logged the chat, so I'm gonna give it a shot. I did make standard pizza dough a long time ago, and remember it being a gigantic hassle, having to spread it out over the table and doing all this and putting flour on it and stuff like that. And by the end of the day, yeah, it tasted great, but I just kind of remember the hassle part of it more than I remember the good taste part of it. So my my torpid sloth, yes, my torpitude. Am I using that word right? Maybe not. Got in the way of my pizza making. And Pandavits did say sometimes makes the sauce. Usually it's just a basic pasta paste mixed in with some seasoning. Type depends on what he wants. And then basically one part paste, 1 part water. Not really homemade since I don't make the paste, but yeah, the dough's a big thing. So if you're making your own pizza dough, even if it's a simple version, the focaccia, I'm sure it's awesome. I need to get into that tradition. Oh, you guys made me hungry. All right, let's fight the hunger and let's keep going. So the next thing is to get enemies out here. I can't use the normal spawning system because that spawns enemies with AI, so I need to probably just create an instance. What do I need to do? Let me check the enemies object. Script enemy creates. Okay. Maybe dead shooting random. Yeah, it does add the enemy path, adds the instances. But it doesn't look like it starts the enemy moving yet. So I might be able to get away with just creating an enemy instance and then passing in that timeline. We'll see. We'll see. I may have to create another object based on this, like a child object that does something different. Would that be easier? Let me check timelines really quick, because if I can set them from the outside, I don't have to create another object just for the opening enemy type. With player, it worked fine because, player, there's just one player, so I want him to behave the same way every time. That's fine. Timeline add. That might be what I need to do. Adds a new timeline. That just creates a timeline. That's not what I want to do. Timeline index. There we go. Brilliant. All right. So this does not start the timeline, that's running, but what this should do is I should be able to grab an enemy, create the instance, and then from the player timeline be able to set the enemy's timeline to this. The only thing I have to do is to get the timeline index. We'll see. We'll see. Maybe I don't have to use global or anything, but let's do this. So that's kind of what I need to do. So let me just copy that over, and let's see what happens. So before draw occurs, I guess I want the enemy to start coming out not too long after the player. So let's do 60 frames, 1 second. And the first thing I need to do is create an enemy object. So create bad cowboy. Where? Maybe I won't worry about that for now, because the path should take care of it for me. And, well, shoot, I think I need to use scripting for this. Yes, I do, because I need to keep track of that bad cowboy that I'm creating, so I can't get away with just doing this. Alright, let's see, instance create. Is there an instance create function? Yes, there is. Okay, good. And I'll just create it at 0, 0 for now. And I want it to be a bad cowboy, the best kind. And this will be enemy 1. And I guess I need to create enemy 2 anyway, so instance create. Let's do them both. And I need to give them a timeline. So enemy 01 dot timeline index equals, what am I calling it? TL enemy 01 opening. Yep, that should give me the index I need, so I don't need to put global in front of it, which is good. And then set the second enemy's timeline to that second one, which I think comes from the bottom of the screen. Let's see, there we go. And I can feel the pizza chat over here, and it's making me hungrier and hungrier. Need to concentrate, not food. I did have a donut for breakfast, so I guess and all that nutrition is wearing off pretty quick. So that should give my timeline, and I do need to start it because it did give me that warning. It said you have to use timeline running, so timeline position. I think the timeline position should be 0 by default, so I don't need to set that. So timeline running. Let's do that for these two. Timeline running. And I need to set it to true, so they're actually playing the timeline instead of just having it as a variable. So that should set them both on the path. Let's see if that's enough to get it to work. It may be. Spawn enemies. Let's see what happens. Hopefully some weird alarm somewhere doesn't take over and start making them move like AI characters, or make them shoot or something. We'll find out.
Ready, set, draw.
Let me see something. It's kind of working, but I think their path is taking over. So let me use my path debugger. Yes, I think their path is taking over. So I need to disable that on them. So bad cowboy. Dodge, wait, base speed. So there's something inside of SCR enemy create. Maybe it's inside of step. Yeah. Okay. I think this is taking over. Because what's happening is, obviously step gets called every frame. They start on the path, but because they're not dodging or shooting, they're able to move, obviously. So it does the move calculation, so it gives them a path. And the two things conflict and they go on their own way. So I need a way to stop this. So I probably need an enemy freeze as well. So let's add that in. SCR enemy create, let's put it in there. Enemy freeze. Is the enemy movement frozen? EM freeze equals false by default, I guess. And let's make sure to set it to false in the timeline before I forget. Sound effects can go away. Now let's put it in the enemy's timeline, because that's the logical place for it. Enemy freeze is true, so that should take over. Boom, boom, okay. And inside of step, let's add it into here. Should I add it into here? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I should add it on the outside of the loop, because I'm going to have the same problem with player, but I don't want him to be just purely frozen. I'm going to want to be able to do something with him in the opening. Well, let's do this for now. If I need to do something more complicated, I'll do it. But let's do it for now, so that if enemy is frozen, it stops the pathing and all that stuff. Movement calculation, stop if something's in the way, that's fine. I don't even think this is doing anything. No, it is doing something. Okay. That should be enough to keep the enemies on the right path. Let's find out.
Ready.
Okay.
Set.
Yeah, I do need to do something special for frozen states, because what this is doing is it's setting their speed to 0, which is undoing all that, so you need to have a special thing for frozen. I can't just let it go. Let it go. EM freeze is equal to false. Let's do the normal one on top. Isn't frozen. If the enemy isn't frozen, let him go, let him go. That song will be stuck in my head forever. There we go. Okay. Else. Probably have some else stuff in there, but for now, let's just make sure it works. And once I'm done, I will catch up to the pizza chat that's going on. Looks like they're moving on the path. That guy got stopped by the barrel because I did the path wrong. But that was actually great timing. Great timing, but not exactly what I need. I need to be able to control that timing, obviously, so, but kind of getting in the right direction there. And let me catch up here. You guys are getting me hungry. Okay. I'm probably not going to repeat all the chat because you guys definitely are going into the pizza stuff, but let's see. Wow, got excited over pizza. I should do a pizza feed. Okay. Torpid Sloth came back, was away for a little bit, and came into pizza talk. That's what I do all day. Torpid Sloth, you make pizza? Do you work in a pizzeria, or? Yeah, let me know, man. I love pizza talk. That's why, Pandavits makes his own pizza and made me hungry one time, and that's why I kind of initiated the pizza talk as well, because I love to hear about pizza. Don't get very good pizza over here in Japan. Wow. Oh, man, you guys are driving me crazy with your pizza talk. So hungry. Making me so hungry, but yeah, that sounds awesome. I'll have to catch up to all that stuff in the chat after the show, but yeah, for those of you who are just jumping in, there is pizza talk. Be warned, because it makes me very happy. Yeah, that was my notes with the times and stuff. Not sure why I brought that up. I guess I'm just kind of thinking of pizza. Let's see. What is the next thing I need to do? I do have the enemies coming out. I do need to fix the path of that one guy because he's running right into the barrel. So, actually, in fact, maybe I should just drop that barrel down. That might be the way to go. Let's drop it down a little bit. So that drops that barrel obstacle down. The next thing is to fix the path itself, which is this one, so that that enemy doesn't run into the barrel. That should be good enough. Yep, yeah, that should be good enough. In fact, I should probably make this guy go to this point because it's longer, so they walk the same speed. So if I want the guy in front, I should use the closer enemy. And so this guy should be the one in front. And let's just make sure he doesn't run into that barrel anymore.
Ready, set, draw.
Yeah, it's not too bad. They're not lined up with the player, so I do need to fix that. The timing on that bullet is actually pretty darn good. The thing that's triggering it is when the enemy gets within a certain distance of the player, the enemy manager kind of randomly polls for enemies that can shoot at the player and says, okay, you can shoot, it's time for someone to shoot at the player, do it. So because that enemy just happens to come within range, that bullet just kind of comes out at about the right time. I may need to control it a little more than that, but maybe not. Maybe it is kind of interesting that it's random because then you have to pay a little bit of attention when you're starting. But let me fix those paths so that it is right with the player. The player right now is at 152. So let me change the snap on these grids here, and let's make sure the enemies are in line. So 152. Move him back a little more, and 152. Paths are fun. Okay, so now the enemy should be right in line with the player and facing the player. I'm going to have to adjust the timeline to make sure enemies don't start pouring out too soon. But they all kind of come to the middle.
Ready, set, draw.
So ideally, have that going on. So that's kind of getting into the tutorial stuff a little bit. Paths are cool, scripts are cool, fonts are obviously fine. This needs to go way up. I actually need to add a moment. Let's see, let's make it really big so I have plenty of room to move. So before I let enemies start spawning into the map, I want to make sure all this other stuff gets out of the way. Look at the chat and I see black truffle oil. It's like, wow. I love this world. Games and pizza. The perfect combination. Just throw a little beer and cola in there and man, perfect combination. I wish I could just invite you all over. Well, heck, I wish I could go to Pandavit's house and actually make the game there so I could actually eat pizza. Sysannounce, so that turns the text off. This is probably about the time the enemies would do their thing. Yeah, I guess I do need to control the enemy when they shoot, so I do need to do something in enemy for that. What am I doing for that? Begin step. Okay, this is the part where I think the aiming takes place. The bullet's close, try to dodge. Ready alarm, shoot. If the enemy has been given the order to shoot, shoot. Okay. This is actually going to be something I can exploit right now. Some of you guys might remember this from when I did it earlier this year, but I do have something called, I think it's just like an enemy manager. Well, there's basically just an enemy manager that sits up here inside of room manager. And what it does is it gives orders to all the enemies in the room. And if their order is to shoot, it gives them an order to shoot. So all I have to do is set this to true and the enemy will shoot. So I do have to disable this so they don't shoot multiple times. Set ready to false. Alright, so let's see. The enemy 2 is the one I think that's in front. So let's see, add. It's actually probably all easier in the same timeline, but I'll keep them separate. I'll keep them logically grouped. So draw comes at 180. Text disappears at 210. So at 210, I should have the enemy shoot. So I will set their orders to true. And let's see, in the meantime, is there something I can give the enemy manager to say, don't give anyone orders? Pickup timer, enemy spawn pattern. Am I doing that inside of system? Order enemies to shoot. So if I set RM next shot to false, I should be able to turn off this thing that gives them the orders to shoot. I should be able to. Whether the enemy can take its shot. RM next shot is false. What would probably be even better is if I don't turn that on in the first place. So I need to, this is where yeah, you know, you were mentioning before that alarms kind of make things a pain in the butt, and this is why, because you're kind of having to search through all these things to figure out what you need. So alarm 4, so whatever's calling alarm 4 is what's triggering the firing, and that's probably inside of like room start, actually. Alarm 3, alarm 0, initialize grid path, room. Yeah, there it is. Okay, so when the room starts, it sets the alarm saying, okay, you can start firing after X number of seconds. So what I need to do is turn that alarm off and remember to turn it on again later. So I need to keep track of that. And alarm 4 inside of room manager. Alarms can be a pain in the butt. All right. Let's do this inside of here. So when I finally do start spawning enemies, this is when I want to set room manager's alarm 4 to this. In the meantime, set room manager's alarm 4 to -1 so that it doesn't trigger. And I need to comment this stuff. Stop the firing orders. Just so I remember what that is. Reset the firing orders. Okay. Good, good, good. That should be all I need to do. Hopefully. And Sirius mentioned dough mixed with the crust with bacon and cheese. Oh yeah, but Pandabits did mention that keeping cheese inside of pizza dough is kind of a pain. Yeah, I guess that's why pizzerias, well, like, you know, the Pizza Huts of the world and stuff waited a while to do that stuff, because I guess it is kind of a hassle because it drools out onto the pizza, but if you can pull it off, it's worth it, because then it makes the crust actually something more exciting to eat. Alright, let's see what the enemies do. Hopefully they don't shoot, except when they're triggered to. Yes! And if I did it right, until the enemies start spawning, these guys shouldn't shoot again. I'm going to have to turn off the icon spawning thing as well. I set, let's see, 120, well, 1,200 is the equivalent of 20 seconds. So it's going to take quite a while for other enemies to start spawning out. Let's not do it that way, but let's set this down a little lower to maybe 10 seconds. But it's working. I can time exactly when the enemy's going to fire. So that's good. But I don't want the enemy to fire until the players had their chance to fire. So, system. Let me do system. Kind of getting to the 2-hour mark, so I probably will cut this off at some point, but I do want to at least get the start of the tutorial in there, so it's just a matter of adding that stuff. So this is the opening text sequence. That's if systext announce is true. So I should also have text announcements. I should also have tutorials text. I don't want it to be in the middle of the screen because it'll kind of get in the way of everything, so I need to have a different one. So tutorial text. And I'm going to do something similar. In fact, let me just copy this because it's so similar. It's worth copying. I don't want, let's see, so I need it to be down at the bottom of the screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this. I'm going to use HView, which will give me the bottom of the screen, and bring it up. View HView. Actually, I need to do this to get the bottom of the screen. And then I'm going to subtract up a bit. Let's try 50. And what I need is another font for tutorial. Everything else should be about the same. So font tutorial. Let me make sure I make that. Duplicate font tutorial so I can get my color font, and let's make this a little smaller, maybe 15. We'll see. I can always change font sizes later. System, announce, draw, what's the other one called? Systext tutorial. So that's the only thing that's different in here. So it's a different string that'll trigger this. Okay, systext tutorial. And that's all handled in system. So tutorial text display. And as long as I feed something into that, it should display at the bottom of the screen. So let's do that in player opening. Draw. So set system systext tutorial to let's just say obviously I'm going to need to use variables and stuff inside of this text later because it depends on whether the player is using a controller, a keyboard, or a mouse, and probably what I'll do is whatever control method they use to start the game is the one I'll give the tutorial for. Maybe I'll just keep track of the last thing they touched. So like if they're moving the mouse around, then give them the mouse tutorial, something like that. But for now, I'm just going to keep it simple. Yeah, let's make it a string. I'm just going to say right mouse button just to make sure that the system itself is working. And I'm going to add a step. Well, no. This is going to be a little trickier, but for now I'm going to keep it simple. Let's see, 240, 240, 270. I need to clear that text off, otherwise it'll just display for the rest of the game. what I'm going to need to do in the future is have the player actually pressing the fire button, triggering stuff. So I'm going to need multiple timelines. This is just the opening. What I'm probably going to need to do is get to a certain point, wait for the player to fire the bullet, then start switching to a different set of timelines and stuff. But that's a little more than I can do in 2 hours. So let's just make sure that the text displays properly. And freeze is true. All right, let's see. Let's see what it does.
Ready, set, draw.
Actually, why is it? Okay. Kind of worked. I should have said left mouse button to shoot because that's my control scheme, but see, I followed my own tutorial and messed up.
Ready, set, draw.
So theoretically, they both duck, the bullet comes back, and they fire. So I just need to change their fire timing to be something closer to what I'm expecting. All of these are going to have to be triggers later, but for now I'm just going to use timing because I'm the only one playing this, thankfully, so at the moment. So I just want to make sure it flows the way I expect it to. One other thing I guess I need to do. When the player, let's see, the other enemy fires at 300. So what I need to do at step 300 is give one more tutorial message. Like that. And assuming their bullet comes back after about a second. Obviously, doing this timing stuff is not going to be the final solution, but add 330. Doing this kind of the manual way. Making it go away. Add 390. Make it go away again. Just to get an idea for whether the sequence itself is actually making sense. And Pandabit said, but at the end of the day, do you want to be gimmicky or have a baller dough? Yeah, I guess if you focus on, a good dough, you don't need anything else in it, right? And Pandabits did ask, do you know what you're doing for the next Unplugged? Yeah, let me show this first, and then I'll get right into that because I'm kind of reaching the end here.
Ready, set, draw.
So I get my instruction, I shoot. Timing's a little off, but there we go. There's, in principle, my tutorial. And ideally, well, actually timing-wise it worked out. Enemies start appearing and I can move around, so I probably need, text to say, how to move and stuff like that. But that gives me kind of my opening sequence. It makes sense because it's a cowboy game, so they have a little, showdown. Shows that you can shoot, shows that enemies can duck, shows that enemies shoot at you, shows that you can duck. And the last thing would be to show like charged shots and things like that. And then just give one quick message to say how you can move and let the player go to it, and that would be my tutorial, because you don't need a whole lot. So episode 34, what we did, we got all this stuff done. Got the player to walk to the middle and stopped. So I will approve you guys in Steam later. No worries. Got displaying ready, set, draw fine. Have it actually playing ready, set, draw as a sound effect, which I made. The enemies walk out to the middle. The tutorial does give you a shoot prompt. The enemies do dodge. Should put these in order. The enemies do get hit on the rebound. The enemy then shoots. Well, the enemy gets hit next. That's working. Then the enemy shoots. You're given the dodge prompt. And you're good to go. And I needed to squeeze this in to the shoot prompt. Actually, that means the same thing, so let's get this out of there. I don't need that. Let's just delete it. Yep. All right. So that's what I got done for episode 34. Ready, set, game over. Thank you guys for watching. I should set up episode 35 for next week. And I'm also going to have something I need to ask you. So let's do episode 35 first. Don't know what I'm going to call it yet. And let's use Torpid Sloth's hint and move it over to, let's see, 3. Save me all that scrolling. Okay. For next episode, it'll be result screen, game over, win. And maybe visualize the super shot timing with a flash of the gun. So thank you guys for watching our game development show. You can catch past episodes and this one over at youtube.com/Tengu Studio. And if you're watching this later on YouTube, you can drop by the live show we do every week on Twitch TV Blue Tengu, so drop by next week. That's Fridays 3 to 5 Pacific, 4 to 6 Mountain, 5 to 7 Central, 6 to 8 Eastern if you're in the Americas. If you're in the UK, it's 11 p.m. Friday night until 1 a.m. Saturday morning. If you're in Japan with me where I do this, it's 8 to 10 Saturday morning. If you're in Australia, it starts anywhere from 8 to 10 depending on where you live in Australia. Obviously, Australia is a big place. And New Zealand, it starts at 11 a.m. Saturday mornings. We always announce what we're doing through Twitter, so follow Tengu to keep track of when the live show starts or episodes go up, or follow us on Twitch or YouTube. And of course, you can see what we're up to anytime over at our site, bluetengu.com. Thank you for watching. Thank you guys in the chat, Panovitz, Cirrus, Gary, and Torpid Sloth, everyone who joined in. Thank you for chatting. If you have anything else you want to say you didn't get to say during the show, you can email me anytime at eric@bluetengu.com. Looking forward to hearing from you guys, and I will see you next time.